And it's Morning Report, and as we've been reporting this morning, the Environment Minister David Parker says farmers may be forced to cut cow numbers to meet tougher rules around protecting waterways. Haere mai ki te kaiarahi o te rōpū Nahinara. Welcome to the leader of the National Party, Simon Bridges.
Kia ora, Guyan.
What do you think of this plan?
Look, I think it's a real assault on the regions. We saw it in oil and gas, no analysis, no plan, and now we're seeing it here. I've always been of the view that this government would come for farmers over time, and you've seen talk about an ETS tax, you've seen Mycoplasma bovis and discussion about that on this station, and now you're seeing this. And I think what I would say is it seems to be a lack of any kind of comprehension that when the farmers sneeze, we all catch a cold. Whether in urban or rural areas, we are in this together. They've been making a lot of environmental gains, but just culling the cows, when you haven't got a plan around that and you don't have other viable industries coming up to take the slack is a very bad idea indeed.
Okay, well, let's dig into that. So do you not support this idea of having nutrient maximums for water catchments?
Well, I think the difficulty here is, and I say it's like oil and gas, it's perhaps actually for the boffins the worst part of all of this is there is no analysis. The minister acknowledged that. So it's one thing to say this, but if there was a considered plan that we could work through and see this happening over time, okay. But we've got farmers who've done a lot already. They've made huge improvements. We had a plan in government spending $400 million on these kind of issues. And actually the latest evidence and a significant report last week actually shows river qualities improving quite significantly.
We'll get to that because MFE says that nitrogen rate's getting worse and 55% of the sites they monitor are only better in 28. So it's a mixed picture at best there. But can I get some clarity? Because we already do have councils setting maximum nutrient rates for water catchments now. What do you oppose about that? This is what he's talking about. If you can farm with more cows, then that's fine, as long as you meet the nutrient maximum level he's talking about.
I think it's one thing to put in place rules that are prospective, that actually limit the numbers going forward, in terms of not going further. But I think to come out on television without a plan and say what he said about reducing the numbers is reckless.
Well, he's just saying, he's talking about setting a limit on the amount of pollution you can put into the river. Do you agree with that? Do you agree? Let's get some clarity. Do you agree with that?
Well, I can't agree in the abstract. I can't say to you today on the show, that's all fine, because I don't have a plan in front of me. And that's the real harm in this.
So tell me what's wrong with setting a limit about the amount of pollution you can put in a river. What's wrong with that?
Well, actually, you've got to have a plan behind that. Just having a rule without having thought it through in government, and he's made clear he hasn't. He has zero analysis about any of that.
No, he said the economic modelling was difficult.
And before that, he made quite clear he hadn't done it. So to go on television, to tell farmers you're going to whack them, but you actually aren't sure about the plan around any of that, I think is reckless. We saw it on oil and gas. Zero analysis. We are seeing it again here. And is it any wonder business confidence in this country and the investment profile is going down significantly?
Well, what about the confidence in our waterways and the confidence in our rivers and lakes, which have been getting worse?
That's incredibly important.
Yeah,
and what do we do about it? Well, we do a couple of things.
Well, he's trying to do something about it by saying you can only put so much pollution into a river.
Well, he's got us in the worst of all worlds, actually. It's not how we should govern in New Zealand. He's making big statements and he's not backing it up with any analysis or a plan.
But there's been endless amount of analysis done by the Land and Water Forum, which your government had been part of as well. And they're coming up with this idea. Federated Farmers is on that body. They're talking about this is largely their consensus.
Well, I don't accept that what David Parker is saying is largely their consensus. I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, an acknowledgement from the minister is required that actually farmers have been doing a huge amount. And you can have different views on the evidence, but the most recent evidence does tend to be suggesting some improvements in our waterways. And then secondly, I'm not arguing with you, Guy, on that there is a need for a plan around these very complex, important issues
but
in
you
New
just
Zealand.
didn't want to do anything
But
about
to
it.
come
You were
out with a
pouring
headline,
money into irrigation and irrigating land. The amount of irrigated land increased 70% between 2002 and 2017. I know you weren't in government all that time, but a good whack of it. And we're paying the price with rivers that you can't swim in.
You can make that case. As I say, the most recent evidence points to improvements. We had a $400 million plan in this. It's a positive plan. I take the view, actually, what you saw from the minister, yesterday and today is pretty cavalier. It's coming out with some bold statements, yes, but they're driven by values, by vibe, and not actually by hard evidence in a plan. It's very easy, Guy, to get rid of sectors, to impose costs on them. We've seen it with oil and gas, and we're now seeing it with the farmers. But if you don't have things to replace them with, actually you're hurting New Zealand's economy and the health and education that we need to provide for.
So are you saying this morning that you oppose the idea of putting maximum nutrient levels on water catchments?
No, not necessarily. I need to see a plan.
You're trying to have it all ways, aren't you?
Because that's important. Because actually he is as well. He's come out with the big statements. There's nothing behind it. I'm entitled, actually, it's my constitutional role in opposition to be looking at the plan behind it. But I think it's really appalling, actually. It's perhaps the worst thing we've seen from this government, that on oil and gas first and now on this, they're going to do something and they make clear what they're doing, but no one can analyse what's underneath it. It's a far cry from saying, actually, over time, this is what we're going to do. It will lead to less increase than we've seen in some parts where it is unsustainable, to what he's frankly saying, which is, I'm imposing these limits, don't care how, now it's about implementation, don't have a plan, and it's going to see reductions in cows around New Zealand.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I think we're going to die wondering. That is the National Party leader, Simon Bridges, on his view on the water issues discussed by the government. We're interested in your views on this one. We'll try and read some of them out maybe after the 8 o'clock news this morning. 2101 on the text, morning report at radionz.co.nz on the email. I know a lot of you have been getting in touch on Twitter too, NZ Morning Report. It's 12 minutes to 8.
And lots of that feedback coming in during that interview. Well, nearly 2,000 people have been evacuated from homes on Hawaii's Big Island after lava eruptions destroyed 5 houses. Authorities are worried that sulphur dioxide gas could harm anyone in the area. A new fissure spewed lava up to 70 metres into the air, and new cracks opened on a highway in the Leilani Estates area. That's about 20 kilometres from where the Kilauea volcano erupted 3 days ago. The island was rocked by a 6.9 earthquake on Saturday, and more earthquakes and eruptions are forecast. Ira Haas is one resident who had to leave.
It was so powerful, it was thunderous. I mean, it was just like, and just erupting like a jet engine, and then it sounded like bombs.
Well, more and more fissures keep appearing.
All we heard was a boom. What is that? And then all of a sudden we smelled the sulfur dioxide. We knew something was happening. Within minutes, we've seen smoke, and now we see all